Hello there. It's been a little while. I wanted to do a video about this coronavirus thing that you may have heard of. I'm going to do this in one take, and so forgive me if it's not perfectly articulated, but I wanted to do it reasonably spontaneously. I've got a couple of notes here, but I wanted to do it all in one hit. And so, because the circumstances of my life somewhat insulate me from the fallout of all of this, I'm nowhere near as affected as many people are. I've had a chance to spend a lot of time talking to people, listening to people, and gaining a pretty broad perspective on all of this. And for me, the most important question to emerge is the idea of how we have been for decades, whether consciously or not, whether we actually agreed to it or not, we have been sacrificing resiliency for efficiency. Um, and I hear no talk of this whatsoever in the sort of legacy mainstream media, but there is in pockets of the internet conversations about this. And I wanted to do my little tiny bit on my YouTube channel just to turn the volume up on those questions and those conversations, because I think for me anyway, it's the most important idea to emerge from all of this. And so what I'm talking about is the trade-off that inevitably exists between efficiency and resiliency. So as you increase efficiency, you also increase fragility. It's an inevitability. So for example, the just-in-time supply chains that so many organizations work on mean that they're not having to hold stock. They don't have to have as much warehouse space. They don't have to, they're less wastage, all of that kind of thing. But because everything's arriving just in time to be delivered on to the next step in the chain, if that chain gets interrupted at any point, there's no slack there to be taken up, and so that the chain potentially immediately collapses. So this is extremely fragile. Another idea is that things run at primarily full capacity, right? It's inefficient to have rooms standing empty, staff not engaged in actually doing things all the time. And so, cutbacks in wages, cost-cutting exercises in general, reducing premises costs, etc., means that there is again no slack to be taken up. When there is a surge in demand, there's no slack to be taken up. I mean, in the UK, certainly already emergency rooms were overwhelmed, right? There was already excessive waiting times in emergency rooms, and so add a tiny little bit of extra pressure to that, and the whole thing potentially falls apart. So that's another one. And then the third example I've got here is the notion of always being optimized for one thing. And this is both people and equipment, right? So when you're building a factory to make a car, for example, the only thing that factory knows how to make is cars. To repurpose that factory is a major undertaking. It takes time, it takes huge capital. Staff are trained generally in most organizations, not all. Some already do, sort of more diverse exposure to skills, but in many organizations, each person in that organization in that organization is trained to do one thing and one thing only, and they may do it very well, but that's all they know how to do. And so someone made a point in a conversation I had that as global calamities go, this is a really gentle one. It's like you've got some important lessons to learn. Here's a little kick up the backside. Wake up, learn these lessons. Otherwise, next time it's only going to be much worse. It's important to understand that although nobody could have predicted 6 months ago that we were going to have a novel virus spreading around the globe, it was easy to predict. It's a certainty that at some point along the road there is going to be an unexpected calamity, and the greater our ability to, in a general sense, absorb the impact of the unexpected, the less of this kind of nonsense, that we're the complete shutdown of absolutely bloody everything, that we need to see in the future. And so I would like to offer a few things, just basically off the top of my head, types of the suggestions that will build resilience, but it's going to be at the expense of efficiency, which in turn is at the expense of profits and shareholder returns and all of that kind of thing. And this has just got to be accepted. Or if shareholder returns and profits are the most important thing, then let's be explicit about that. Let's say, okay, we accept we're going to have a high level of fragility because we want to have high levels of profits, but you can't have both. You can't have resilience and efficiency at the same time. There's a trade-off to be made, right? And a conversation needs to be had. To what extent are we willing to sacrifice resilience in the pursuit of profit? At what point do we stop in the pursuit of profit because we recognize that it's in all of our interests to have a certain amount of resilience built into the economy, right? And so we need to understand that there is that trade-off being made all the time, bring that front and center and understand what we are doing. So anyway, like I said, a few examples of the types of things we can be doing. Firstly, at the individual level. I mean, pretty obviously, if everybody had a couple of months of stocks in the freezer and in the form of dry goods and bottled water and so on, it means that nobody has to panic, right? When something comes along, everyone's got a couple of months where they don't have to panic. Um, if a significant number of people had solar systems, generators, whatever, that kind of thing, this can absorb impact. So, building this in at an individual level is step number one. Step number two is to think about businesses and companies. How can they make themselves more resilient? And in doing so, contribute to the overall resilience of the society. And so things like, as I've already mentioned, training staff to be a bit more diverse in their skill sets. You know what I mean? Encourage additional training in things that are outside of their immediate purview, um, just to have that capacity, that spare capacity built in. When you're building a factory, instead of building it and optimizing it to make that one thing and that one thing only, build it in a modular way, right? It costs a little bit more, but by building it in a modular way, you can take bits out, put other bits back in, and very quickly and easily repurpose that factory to make new things. I mean, imagine if, a vacuum cleaner factory could be repurposed overnight to start manufacturing ventilators, thousands of them a day, this kind of thing. It's not, technically speaking, this is not a particularly difficult challenge, but as I've already said, there is a sacrifice of profit, a sacrifice of efficiency involved. Um, at the next level up, at the government societal level, you could institute like there's army reserves. People, they do 2 or 3 weeks a year, or whatever it is, of training, and they maintain a sort of basic level of skills. They're not full army, but they're reserves, and they can support the army when there's demand for them. Why could we not do something similar with medical reserves, with construction reserves, with logistics reserves? Where everybody in the population spends a couple of weeks a year doing something that isn't their normal job, just to keep their hand in, so that if that thing becomes needed, you've got a whole bunch of reserves and volunteers to do that. Seems to me to be a relatively simple way to build a massive amount of spare capacity and thus resilience into the economy. So that's about it. Just a short video. I'm going to make one more. I want to talk also about the lockdown and staying at home and some of the opportunities that this actually could present. So I'll do another one on that very shortly. But for now, thank you very much for watching.